Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror, but something feels off. The reflection looks like you, moves like you, blinks when you blink, but the person staring back seems strangely hollow, as if the light behind the eyes has dimmed. You tilt your head slightly, and the reflection follows, yet the feeling lingers. You recognize the face, but you no longer recognize the self behind it. Imagine walking through your day on autopilot, smiling when expected, nodding in rehearsed patterns, saying all the right things, but inside, everything feels muffled. Your words are echoes you barely believe. Your thoughts feel borrowed. Your desires feel assigned. You sense an invisible script directing you, and somewhere along the way, your real voice got swallowed by the noise. Imagine losing yourself not in some catastrophic moment, but gradually, imperceptibly, like a river eroding its own banks. One compromise at a time. One forced smile at a time. One "I'm fine" at a time. You drift further from the raw, untamed core of who you once were. And the unsettling part, you can't pinpoint when the drift began. Was it the moment you tried to fit in? The moment you tried not to disappoint? The moment you tried to be everything except honest? Or was it earlier, before you even knew yourself well enough to lose anything? You start to wonder if the real tragedy isn't losing yourself suddenly, but living so long without the real you that the loss becomes normal. You begin to question whether the self you present to the world is a mask you chose, or one that grew on you like a second skin. What if the truth is even stranger? What if you didn't lose yourself at all? What if you never fully found yourself to begin with? The paradox becomes almost uncomfortable to hold. How can you lose something you never fully possessed? And yet, how can you search for something you can't define? Behind every role you play, student, friend, partner, parent, worker, there is an unspoken fear. If you stopped playing these roles, who would remain? Is there a you, beneath the layers of expectations, fears, and inherited beliefs? Or are you merely a collage of influences, stitched together by survival instincts and societal demands? You can feel the tension tightening like a thread pulled too taut. Something inside wants to break free, but something else tightens its grip, terrified of what freedom might mean. And so the questions grow sharper, more haunting. How does a person slowly disappear from their own life? What psychological machinery consumes the authentic self? Why is it so easy to lose yourself, and so incredibly difficult to reclaim what was lost? There is a deeper truth buried beneath this quiet unraveling, a truth that whispers from the mirror, from the silence, from the restless places inside you. Something wants to be heard. Something wants to be remembered. To understand the psychology of losing yourself, you must confront the hidden forces shaping your identity. And this journey, if you dare to continue, begins by uncovering what's been silently pulling you away from yourself. To understand why losing yourself feels so effortless, you must look beneath the surface to the silent architecture shaping your thoughts, your choices, your identity. Identity is not built in isolation. It is molded, squeezed, and sculpted by forces far older and more powerful than your conscious intentions. The self you think you chose was influenced long before you ever possessed the language to describe it. From the moment you're born, you're taught who you should be. You absorb expectations like oxygen. Approval becomes a kind of currency, and you begin trading authenticity for acceptance. This exchange is so subtle that you hardly notice it happening. A raised eyebrow from a parent, a tone of disappointment, praise that rewards conformity, shame that punishes deviation. Slowly, your inner compass starts pointing not toward your truth, but toward others' comfort. Carl Jung once said that people become divided when they disconnect from the unconscious self, the shadow, the buried impulses, the forgotten instincts. He warned that when we repress parts of ourselves to please the world, we create a kind of internal exile. A banished version of ourselves lingers in the dark, waiting. The more we silence it, the louder it becomes in strange and distorted ways. Anxiety, resentment, numbness, burnout, self-betrayal. Friedrich Nietzsche believed that losing oneself is the natural consequence of living in a culture that demands obedience. Society celebrates the agreeable, the predictable, the well-behaved. It's far easier to reward the person who plays along than the one who dares to question. Nietzsche argued that most people never truly become themselves because they're terrified of the cost. Freedom requires responsibility, solitude, and courage. Conformity, by contrast, offers safety. You become what others want, and in return, you are spared from the discomfort of standing alone. Arthur Schopenhauer took this further, suggesting that much of what we call identity is merely the ego's desperate attempt to survive in a world that often feels indifferent. According to him, suffering is the essence of life, and the self bends and folds itself to avoid it. We adapt to minimize pain, even if that adaptation means sacrificing the parts of ourselves that once made us alive. But the roots run deeper still. You lose yourself not just because others expect things from you, but because you expect things from yourself. Your self-image becomes a double-edged sword. You cling to who you think you should be, the successful one, the resilient one, the rational one, the unbreakable one. Sartre might say that you define yourself through roles to escape the existential burden of absolute freedom. After all, freedom is terrifying. It demands that you choose your identity rather than inherit it. And so, without realizing it, you build a prison disguised as a personality crafted to avoid conflict, a personality shaped to maintain control, a personality constructed to protect you from uncertainty. The hidden problem lies here. The more you curate your identity to survive the world, the more disconnected you become from who you truly are. You trade the genuine self for a performance so rehearsed that eventually, it becomes believable even to you. Society reinforces the performance. Culture glamorizes the mask. Social media amplifies the illusion. You compare your inner chaos to others' polished exteriors and assume that you, uniquely, are failing. But beneath this external machinery lies something fragile and easily overlooked: the original self, unfiltered and raw. The self that existed before you were told who you should be. The self that simply was. And here is the deeper truth. Losing yourself isn't a single event, it's a gradual surrender to forces that have been shaping you all along. A surrender so subtle that you forget you ever had something worth fighting for. But the consequences of this surrender are far more profound than you might imagine. And as you peel back these layers, another realization emerges. The less you understand these forces, the more control they hold over your life. The real danger isn't losing yourself. It's not noticing that you're gone. And the consequences, some visible, some hidden, are waiting in the shadows of your daily life, influencing everything you do. Losing yourself doesn't announce its arrival with alarms or dramatic collapses. It creeps in slowly, settling into the spaces between your thoughts. You don't wake up one morning and find an empty shell where a person used to be. Instead, the erosion is subtle, like a quiet wind wearing down a mountain over decades. But the consequences, those are anything but subtle. At first, it shows up as a vague discomfort. You tell yourself you're tired, stressed, busy. You think it's temporary. You think you'll get back to yourself soon. But days stretch into weeks, weeks into months, and you begin to realize that the version of you you're waiting for may not return on its own. Something fundamental has shifted. Psychologists call it self-alienation, the state of being a stranger to your inner world. You go through the motions of life while feeling disconnected from your own emotions, desires, and values. You nod and smile while your inner voice is reduced to a whisper. You become efficient, but lifeless, responsible, but hollow, present, but absent. And this alienation reshapes everything. Your decisions stop being yours. You choose careers, relationships, lifestyles, not because they reflect you, but because they are expected of you. You chase goals that leave you empty upon reaching them. You pursue approval instead of fulfillment. You settle for comfort instead of truth. Your emotions turn against you. What cannot be expressed turns inward. Suppressed impulses morph into anxiety. Ignored desires become irritability. Silenced pain transforms into numbness. The psyche doesn't forget, it stores, waits, and resurfaces in disguises. You may stop recognizing your own emotional landscape. Your relationships become distorted. When you lose yourself, you don't show up authentically for others. You perform roles rather than connect deeply. You become overly accommodating, or emotionally distant, or inconsistent. You may attract people who benefit from your silence, or repel those who seek depth. The more you abandon yourself, the more unstable your bonds become. And then there is the broader consequence, the one most people don't dare to name. You become easy to control. A person disconnected from themselves is easy to manipulate, not because they are weak, but because they no longer have a clear internal compass. They lose the instinct to say no. They become susceptible to trends, ideologies, validation loops, and external pressures. They mistake noise for guidance. They confuse conformity with stability. They follow the path laid before them because forging their own feels impossible. On a societal level, this is exactly the type of person modern systems prefer: predictable, compliant, endlessly distracted. A person who questions little and consumes much. A person who is busy enough to stay exhausted and exhausted enough to stay compliant. a person who feels the ache of something missing but is too afraid to look for it. This psychological vacuum, this absence of self, becomes fertile ground for cultural conditioning. The less you know yourself, the more you seek identity in the world around you. You adopt opinions not because you examined them, but because they're popular. You imitate beliefs without asking whether they feel true. You mimic others' dreams while abandoning your own. And in the quiet moments of your life, when the world falls silent and the distractions fade, you feel it. The ache, the dissonance, the sense that something profound has been misplaced. You try to drown it out, work harder, scroll longer, pretend better, but the self you lost doesn't disappear. It lingers like an unfinished sentence, like a ghost pressing against the edges of your awareness. You feel the consequences most intensely in the moments when you least expect them. A random night when you can't sleep, an uncomfortable silence in a conversation, a sudden wave of emotion you can't explain. Something in you whispers, "This isn't who you are." And yet, the more you ignore that whisper, the louder the consequences become, until eventually, life forces you to confront the truth. You cannot outrun yourself forever. The question now becomes not merely how you lost yourself, but how you can begin to return. The rebellion begins when you dare to push back. Freedom begins the moment you recognize the cage. And the cage, you realize, was never made of iron. It was built from unexamined habits, unchallenged beliefs, unquestioned fears. The walls were constructed from should, must, and ought to. The door remains locked only because you've been conditioned to believe it is. Breaking free doesn't start with some grand transformation. It begins with a quiet, radical act, telling yourself the truth about what you want, the truth about what you feel, the truth about what scares you, the truth about what you've been pretending. This honesty is uncomfortable. It strips away the comfort of illusion, but it is also the first breath of real liberation. You rebel every time you notice the ways you betray yourself, every time you question whether your reactions belong to you or were inherited from someone else. You rebel when you pause before agreeing, before pleasing, before shrinking. You rebel when you stop outsourcing your identity to the opinions of others. This rebellion is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is not something others easily notice. It is internal, deliberate, and deeply personal. Jung believed that integrating the shadow, the rejected parts of yourself, is the gateway to authenticity. Breaking free means allowing those banished fragments to step into the light without shame. You let your anger speak, not to harm, but to reveal boundaries. You let your sadness breathe, not to drown you, but to teach you empathy. You let your desires exist, not to indulge recklessly, but to live truthfully. Nietzsche insisted that becoming who you are requires unlearning who the world told you to be. He imagined a person strong enough to withstand the loneliness of self-definition, a person who refuses to dilute their essence just because the crowd cannot understand it. History is filled with examples of this kind of rebellion. The great thinkers, artists, leaders, and mystics all shared one thing: they did not seek permission to exist. They refused to abandon themselves for the comfort of fitting in. They dared to be misunderstood. They accepted solitude when authenticity demanded it. To break free, you must reclaim that same courage. Sometimes the rebellion looks like saying no for the first time in years. Sometimes it's leaving a relationship, a job, a belief system, a version of yourself that no longer fits. Sometimes it's choosing silence over constant distraction. Sometimes it's removing the masks that once protected you but now suffocate you. You break free the moment you start paying attention to your inner life, not as a nuisance to be managed, but as a compass to be trusted. You listen to the discomfort, the longing, the dissatisfaction. You treat them not as flaws to fix, but as messages. You break free when you stop living only for external validation, when you stop performing and start being, when you dare to disappoint others in order to remain true to yourself. This is not the easy path. The world does not applaud authenticity the way it rewards compliance. But the reward for choosing yourself is profound. You begin to feel alive again. Your preferences sharpen, your voice strengthens, your boundaries solidify, your values become undeniable. You rediscover an inner center that cannot be shaken by trends or opinions. The rebellion becomes a revolution, not just against society's conditioning, but against your own inner inertia. You start to reclaim the pieces you lost along the way. You start to gather yourself back into wholeness. And as you do, the final question emerges with clarity. What is the truth at the core of who you are? The answer is waiting in the last and deepest realization. The ultimate truth comes quietly, without fanfare, without the thunder of revelation. It arrives like a breath you didn't realize you were holding, like a memory resurfacing from a place you never knew existed. It does not shout, it does not demand, it simply appears simple, undeniable, transformative. Here it is. You never truly lost yourself. You only stopped listening. The self you thought had disappeared didn't die, didn't fade, didn't abandon you. It stepped back. It waited. It watched as you became tangled in expectations, conditioning, survival patterns. It waited for the moment you would turn inward again, finally willing to reclaim what was always yours. This realization reframes everything. You weren't broken. You weren't empty. You weren't defective. You were disconnected. Losing yourself was never a disappearance. It was a separation. And the moment you acknowledge that, something profound shifts. You begin to see the fragments of yourself everywhere. In the things that still stir your curiosity. In the emotions that rise unexpectedly. In the moments when you feel an unmistakable resonance. In the memories that refuse to fade. In the dreams that keep returning no matter how often you bury them. These are not remnants of a lost self. They are signals. They are invitations. They are pieces of a truth that has been whispering all along. You are still here. You realize that the authentic self doesn't vanish. It waits beneath the noise, beneath fear, beneath the armor you built, beneath the persona you polished, beneath all the survival strategies you mistook for identity. And once you see this, something even deeper becomes clear. The self is not a destination. It is a relationship that requires attention, a relationship that requires honesty, a relationship that requires space to breathe, a relationship that requires courage. You see now that authenticity isn't found, it's cultivated. Moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. You become yourself not through discovery but through commitment. You commit to listening, you commit to feeling, you commit to showing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable. And here comes the most liberating paradox of all. You are not meant to find a fixed self. You are meant to create a living one. The self is fluid, evolving, ever unfolding. You do not dig it out of the past, you shape it through the present. You do not recover who you were, you uncover who you are becoming. Once you accept this, the fear of losing yourself dissolves, because you recognize the truth. You are not a final product. You are a continuous becoming. You are a process, not a portrait. You are an unfolding story, not a static identity. And with this comes an unexpected peace. You understand that losing yourself was never failure, it was the beginning. It was the discomfort that pushed you toward awareness. It was the emptiness that created space for truth. It was the silence that allowed you to finally hear your own voice. The final realization is both empowering and humbling. Yourself is not something the world can give or take away. It is something only you can claim. Everything changes when you embrace this. The world stops feeling like a force shaping you and becomes a field in which you shape yourself. You stop being a passive character in your own story and become its author. You stop searching for meaning outside and begin creating meaning within. And that mirror, the one you stood before in the beginning, no longer feels hollow. The reflection looks back with clarity, with depth, with presence. You recognize the person staring back, not because you rediscovered them, but because you finally chose them. And in that choice lies the greatest freedom of all.